Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Okay, good morning to everyone who's here at Temple Beth Am in the White Conference Room. Hello to anyone who's joining via Zoom. Refuah Shlema to those who have a cold. And hello to anyone who's watching on Facebook Live, and hello to anyone who's listening on the Temple Beth Am podcast series. Great to be back with you all. We're in the midst of a very dramatic moment. Exodus night is happening. Last week we finished with verse 33. And I'll just read it quickly and then we'll jump into verse 34. Verse 33 of chapter 12 of Shemot. We read 34?
I read it.
Okay, we read it quickly, right? We didn't do the Rashis, right? Okay. So let me then we'll start with 34 then. Vayisah ha'am et tzeko. The people took their dough, terem yachmat, before it had a chance to chametzify. Mish'arotam, and there's some things, because we're gonna, Rashi doesn't know exactly how to translate it, but their mish'eret, whatever mish'eret is. All right, we discussed how it might be related and might not be related to the root sa'or, the thing in which the dough goes. Surot b'simlotam, bound up on the in their garments, al shikmam, on their shoulders. Right? So, correct. Thank you for reminding me. We did do that verse, but we did not start the Rashi on it. Now that I've reread the verse, anything about the verse itself that people want to point out or comment on before we look at the Rashi? Yes, yeah, we did. I just want to make sure that anyone has final thoughts.
It's not a particularly profound observation.
Well, let us be the judge of that.
Well, I'd rather say it myself than but somehow that image of binding up possibly kneading troughs or something related to the bread in their garments on their shoulder is very realistically evocative. I mean, it just seems to reflect the way people would have, in haste, use their own clothes and garments as rucksacks, essentially. So that's it.
Yeah. In some Sephardi communities, we've done this once or twice at our Seder, there's a moment where usually the kids grab a sack and they throw things over their shoulder, and the leader of the state says, who are you? We're slaves. Where are you coming from? We're coming from Egypt. Where are you going? Land of Israel. And they're cosplaying. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Right? Is it cos? What does that word mean?
Short for costume.
That's what that is?
Yeah. Short for what?
Costume.
Really?
Okay. But does it just mean acting?
Yeah.
Okay. I should have said that acting.
Pretending.
Pretending to be people in that moment, right? Who did not have rolling suitcases, right? They had whatever soft things that they could throw things in, and they slung it over their shoulders. Thank you, Tova. Anyone else on the verse itself?
Morning. We need one more chair.
Any more chairs?
There's one here.
One for Rebecca? Is there one more or two
There's
more?
one more down here.
Okay.
Only one.
Okay, good. So let's jump into the Rashi. The Rashi on Terem Yechmat. Are you volunteering? Yeah. Okay. Let's get normal microphone.
On the screen, lo hinichus
Hinichum
lishvos kedei chemutz.
Okay.
The Egyptians wouldn't allow them to stay long enough for leavening, for the dough to become leavened.
Okay. In order to kind of make sense of the Rashi here, you have to almost proactively forget everything you think you know about the story, because everything you think you know about the story has come to you through a matrix of sources, right? How your religious school teacher taught it to you when you were in third grade, or how Seder night was done in your home, or study you've done. Imagine we are stripped of some of our associations with the story, and we're reading the verses for the first time, right? And we have the phrase Terem Yechmat before it had a chance to rise. And Rashi is almost saying, if I'm coming to this verse and I don't know how the story is going to end, right? I don't know that 2,000 years later, like Jews will be insane about getting crumbs out of the corners of their Honda Accord because of a verse in the book of Exodus, right? And I don't have the toxicity of the notion of chametz in my brain. What does the phrase mean? Terah means before, and yechmatz has a chance to become chametz. And I'm asking myself, why? Why didn't they have a chance to have their dough rise? What would have been the impediment? Yeah, is there? You ever see it?
No.
Okay. These chairs are hard to pretty wide. Okay. And so we have the words for what Rashi's answer is, but I want to know what you think it means. Rashi's answer is, what happened? The Egyptians, lo hinichum, did not permit them, lishhot, to tarry, to delay, today, in order that chimutz, that their dough would rise. That's what Rashi says, but what is Rashi saying? What's the point of this comment, Norm? Microphone?
The Egyptians were in a rush to get rid of them. They felt that their presence was causing lots of Egyptians to die, kind of miraculously to die. And so they wanted them out quickly. And now that they had permission from Pharaoh to get them out, they wanted it done to sweet.
Okay, so one way of reading Rashi is that the concept of the non-rising of the chametz is a further indication of the utter submission, perhaps, of Egypt and Pharaoh to God and to a recognition that they lost. And not only are we not forcing you to stay, we are demanding that you get out now, right? And therefore, the chametz becomes a symbol of God's dominance, right? Can you go back to 6-year-old version of yourself? Do you remember what you first thought about why it was that the dough didn't rise? Who was in a hurry?
Israel.
We were, right? That's certainly my memory. Before I was a student of Torah, my childhood memory of why the dough didn't rise is because when we finally had the door open, we couldn't wait to get out. Rashi is reading the verse. He's not denying that may have also been, the psychological experience of the Israelites, but he's reading the verse in reverse. The chametz is not an indication of our zrizut, our desire to get out of Egypt with God, but an indication of the Egyptians being totally dominated and subjugated, and not subjugated. I can't think of that. Like defeated. Stevie and then Diane. Give Stevie a microphone. I see you too, Rick.
It seems like Rashi's just connecting the verse with the previous verse, right? Like I don't know, maybe that's profound, maybe it's not, but
Say more about
that the previous verse says the Egyptians, hurried them out.
right. But the question is, why does Rashi have to say anything that's just that? Right? What does Rashi think he's adding by what's Rashi's question on Terem Yechmatz, such that this is his answer, if the previous verse already gave us an indication that the Egyptians were pushing us out? Diane?
Well, I was basically going to say what Stevie said. I don't know, maybe it's a lesson in bread making that he's referring to, that in fact bread needs at least a couple of hours to rise before it can be baked. So, I mean, I agree with what Stevie said. It seems like just a repeat of what we've just read.
Okay. There are a lot of hands. So Rick. Okay, Rick, yeah.
Hi. I would just.
Oh, sorry. I muted you by accident, and I can't unmute you. You unmute you?
Hi. How about now?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Hi. I came in a little bit late. I don't know if I heard you talking about the plate on the shoulder a little bit. I just wanted to point out, I'm looking at the English from Silverman, and the people took their dough. So it could have said vayikchu or vayikach ha'am if it's singular, but it's vayisa, which is lifting up, right? Esa enai, lifting up. So I like that image. I like that image instead of just taking it with the vayikach. And so betzek, bitzeko, betzek, is that the dough?
Yes,
Just a question. Batsek? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joel,
It's got the mic.
in front of you.
I think Rashi is trying to disabuse us of the notion that they were doing this because they specifically not want to have chametz. That they were interpreting God's commandments as applying now. When it said get out all the chametz in your house, Rashi is saying no, they weren't following God's commandments here. They were just doing this for practical reasons.
I don't think I understand your comment. Try it again.
Earlier, God says you shall not have any chametz in your house
In the observance of Pesach, right?
in the future.
Right.
So someone who's reading this might think, so they were doing this following that commandment. And Rashi's saying, no. This year, that wasn't a commandment. They were just doing this for practical.
Mm-hmm. That they weren't being from here.
Exactly.
They just literally did not have time to have their bread rise.
They weren't from, they were free.
Uh-huh. Right. Look, everyone, look ahead. We'll get to this verse at some point. Look ahead to verse 39. Some of the super commentaries in Rashi connect this comment Rashi not to the previous verse, as Stevie said, but to a verse coming up in a couple of pages. So after they go out, the Torah is going to explain verse 39, Vayofu et habatzek, and they baked the dough, asher hotziu mitzrayim, that they had brought out with them from Egypt, that they had brought out dough. Ugot matzot, they were loaves of matzah. Why were they loaves of matzah? Kilo chametz, because they were not chametzified. And Rashi adds in the key, the Torah adds in the key, which maybe strengthens your position, Joel. Why were they not chametz? Not because God had said chametz is asur, ki gorshu mitzrayim, because they were expelled from Egypt quickly. V'lo yachlu li'itmameh, they could not wait. V'gam tzedal lo asu lahem, and they were not able to make all the arrangements for their departure. So that's a salient point, right? That this chametz, even though it's going to be attached ritually to future generations of chametz, which becomes a religious isur, this was simply the Egyptians forcing them out. I still think, and it doesn't mean that I'm right, that one of the reasons that Rashi is reinforcing this is because any chance he has to strengthen the idea that God won and the Egyptians lost is part of the way Rashi does his commentary, right? Also, it's interesting contrast, Joel, to what we're going to get out of either this class or next class, where Rashi does read in to that generation of Israelites from Cut, but not here. Tova?
I'm out of order, so I'll say it quickly. Just backing up what Joel said, the fact that the verse Silverman translates in a way that suggests he agrees this, and the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their outer garments upon their shoulders, seems to imply a practical reason that what they would have used in the process of making bread, their kneading troughs weren't available, so they just had to take the dough as it was.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I just requested that someone make it cooler here because it's so wonderful that so many people are here, but everyone is breathing and generating heat. All of your mitochondria are producing energy. It's very warm in here. Norm, and then Barry, and Larry. Or
I think Rashi's trying to resolve a conflict. Way back at verse 8 a few months ago, God commanded us to eat the lamb or goat or whatever we were going to eat, the roasted meat, with matzah and with norim. So we ate matzah more because we were commanded to do so. But we also have this tradition that is reinforced by Rabbi Gamliel every time you attend the Seder, where he says it's because we were in a big hurry and we didn't have time to let it rise, which doesn't apply to Passover night. It might apply to Passover morning. It apparently does apply to Passover morning when we're actually leaving. And so he has this sort of conflict that he has to address. And he tells us we've got leftover matzah and more because we were supposed to eat all of the roast meat before midnight.
Correct.
But leftover the matzah more we didn't have to finish. So we still have some of that we're bringing with us. And on top of that, we have this dough that we aren't going to have time to let it rise, although it seems like if you're carrying it on your back, unless somebody behind you is kneading it for you, it is going to become hummus.
Just linger for a second, and I've given versions of this idea or Torah many times over, that almost everything you think is the case about what the symbolism of the Seder is also the opposite of that, right? So we've discussed many times that is matzah itself, lechem oni, is it the bread of affliction because it's the poor stuff that is the only bread that our ancestors could eat in Egypt, or is it lechem cherut, it's the bread of freedom because it's the stuff that we ate, we took with us on the way out, right? Which valence is it? And even if you go lechem cherut, that it's the bread of Exodus night, as we're seeing here, is it the bread of Exodus night because the Israelites were so eager to get out? Or is it the bread of Exodus night because the Egyptians were so pushy to get them out, right? And you can play that game with almost every other symbol in the Seder night. It's a beautiful complexity. Rabbi J.J. Schachter, from many years, was the rabbi of the Jewish Center in New York, and teaches at YU, just a brilliant scholar, has a whole series of lectures and shiurim on the dialectics of the Seder night and how all of this symbology means two things at once, which in and of itself is an interesting idea. Okay, so let's go around, Larry, then Barry.
Two quick comments, which are complementary to what I said. The first is, it seems to me that this takes the focus off of what we normally think of, which we were talking about before, which is God freed us. We were freed to the Egyptians. So it puts in a very different light to me. If I think of matzah as being, this is what they chased us out with.
Yeah.
Or they chased us out, this is what we have. It's a very different sense.
Yeah.
The other, I'm just trying to make a more modern interpretation here because we always talked about, and I'm afraid where we learned it, that the idea of chametz is puffery, you become arrogant, and when we do the b'dikat chametz, we're searching our souls to not become arrogant. So maybe this has something to do with the people not yet being terem yachmatz. They hadn't yet gotten arrogant. We were a humble people at that time. Maybe this is kind of what Rashi's getting. I'm not sure. Be careful that you don't become that those like the Egyptians who were very arrogant.
Yeah, it's a lovely midrash, right? It's not what the verse means, and it's a lovely way of reading it. That's midrash, reading back into a biblical verse. What will eventually become a rabbinic association with chametz, and certainly a Hasidic association with chametz, right? Once you get to the Middle Ages, chametz is not a foodstuff. Chametz is a trait, it's a human way of being, right? That's what it gets transmuted into. So sure, to read that backwards, Eimu Damu Muchar, that's very lovely, right? That they got out before, the arrogance of their victory got to them, and they left the simple people. That's a lovely midrash. Yeah. Barry. What's that?
I was just looking at J.J.
Oh, okay.
To go back to the essential sentence, it seems that had they been able to, they would have had their go rise. So it was their intention to have their go rise leavened, but they were not able to because they were pushed out.
Right, and there's some super commentaries that say, and if you should say, how could their intention have been to the dough to rise? It's Pesach. The answer is that the Isur of Chametz, the prohibition of Chametz for the first Pesach was just that night and not the rest of the day. We have to live with a 7/8 day prohibition of Chametz, but they would have been permitted to eat pita, which actually was probably what it was that? Or pizza on the second day of their Exodus. But Chaval, all they had was matzah. Okay, yes, Joel, and then we'll go to the next verse.
Well, I just want to relate to what I love what Larry said and what you said, that the fact that the Egyptians pushed them out was a further sign of submission. I think it's the opposite. I think they're still trying to maintain a little bit of dignity. Okay. I say, we're still in control. We tell you when you leave. You're leaving now.
Nice.
So they if they would have said, aha, we won, we can stay as long as we want, we can leave whenever we want to. And that would be chametz, but they weren't chametz yet. They were still subjugated, but they were taking orders in a different direction.
Yeah. I can't 100% why, explain why, but the association I have with your words. Do you remember the day when Sharansky was released from the Soviet Union? It is my teenage years in the 80s were very, very connected with the Soviet Jewish struggle. I know it was a very big topic in this Jewish community here as well. And I remember that there's one scene where he's basically crossing a bridge. I don't know if he was crossing into Finland or Estonia, whatever, and he's flanked by KGB guards. And he is not walking in a straight line. He's basically saying to them, I'm already out of your subjugation of me. And they're walking, and he is establishing his freedom by saying, no one is going to control, you controlled me for 15 years, you don't control me now. But the smallest way of indicating, so what I think you're saying is that maybe with the verse 8, the Egyptians are trying to reclaim some of that last little, but at least we can tell you when to get out. Interesting. Okay, let's go to the next verse. There's something in chatted. Hold on.
Or Rashi.
Or we can do the next Rashi. That's also an option. Norm.
Misha Rusam. What's here? Sheirei Matzah Umor.
Okay. Sometimes when Rashi says, sometimes when Rashi has a creative midrash on a verse, he says first, Lafip Shuto is this. This is, just so you know, reader, I know what it means, but here's a midrash that is a more fantastical reading. In this case, I'm pretty sure he's doing that, he's just not saying he's doing it. He knows that a misheret is a noun, it's the thing that holds the dough. But it's almost the same. Latif Shuto, misheret is the vessel in which the dough was held. But here's a wonderful midrash, because what he's about to say is a wonderful midrash. It's very far from shot. So what's he saying? He's taking the word misharod and not connecting with soor, which is leaven, but sha'ar, shin aleph resh. What does sha'ar mean? Remaining, leftover. Anini shar. I'm still there, right? And so what the remaining what? Shayarei matzah umaror. What does that mean, Norm?
It's the leftovers of matzah and more.
From what? From the night before, right? So what's the impact of this? This clearly not what the verse means. What's the scene or the image that he's creating by reading it that way? And what's the impact of it? What's the sermon? What they took with them, he wants us to read the verse is, the people bore their dough before it had time to rise, full stop, and also their extras, the leftover matzah and maror from the previous night, they took with them in their makeshift rucksacks. What does that do? What's the impact of that, Carl?
Well, when you're a refugee, worried people, you don't leave anything useful behind. You take provisions to sustain you on your trip.
So one way of reading Rashi is to reinforce how vulnerable they were. They took every crumb with them. You could drash and say, does that suggest that they lacked the faith that God was going to provide for them? Right? I think I've told this story before. The Merkaz Klita in Israel after Operation Solomon was having a vermin problem. Is this familiar to you?
No.
There was some story in the early 90s. I think it was after Solomon, not Moses, but it might have been after Operation Moses in 1994, where there was a very well-run Merkaz Klita who were absorbing Ethiopian immigrants. And all of a sudden, this absorption center that had never had this problem before started to have an intractable vermin problem. And they couldn't figure out why. And what they realized is that the Ethiopian children orphans were taking food from every meal and hiding it under their mattresses because they couldn't believe that another meal was going to come. And so there was food in the dorm rooms, and that was attracting vermin because they had no concept that your breakfast would be followed by lunch, and that lunch would be followed by dinner. So maybe this is an indication of a frenzied nervous people. We don't know when our next meal is going to be. Any other possibilities what Rashi could be talking about, Rebecca?
They're extending their Pesach ceremony. So they're, retaining the symbols and extending what they were doing and, using them.
The original second day Yontif, right? Right.
Whoa.
Last night, they're getting ready for the second Seder. This is what I was saying before you, Joel. Most people read Rashi in that direction, which is not to suggest that the other one isn't accurate. That look how frum these Israelites were, right? They obviously didn't have any leftover meat. Why? You're commanded to finish it. But everyone has leftover matzah, and is it matzah? And maror, right? And they could have just left it there because maror doesn't taste so good, and matzah is not the delicacy, but they took it with them because they wanted this is a contraction of a source in the Mechilta, which is one of the Midrashim in the book of Exodus. Chavivim alehem hamitzvot. That the mitzvahs, their obligations, the symbols of Seder night were so beloved to them that they wanted to keep it with them on their bodies. You have a hand up, Matt, or are you thinking about having a hand up?
Just a question. Are we reading this? We saw Ha'am et B'tzei Terem Yichmatz, or are we reading it Terem Yichmatz Lishotam?
Tropistically, we're reading this term Yechmatz, right? The et nachtaz on Yechmatz.
It could be related to the next.
Not really, because the singular of the Misharotam is Hamisheret Shalahem, and Misheret is feminine, right? So it would be term Techmatz Misharotam. But let's say we could play the game, then what? What's your there for?
And that's what's developing. That's less the leftovers are somehow growing.
Chamatzifying after the fact. Yeah. Rachel.
We read earlier in this chapter about the Pesach sacrifice and that we're not supposed to have anything left over. And here we're reading about taking the leftovers with them. And I think maybe where I'm not clear is the actual Exodus as compared to the instructions for the later ritual. Because
were you not listening to your husband?
What?
Were you not listening to your husband? Twice your husband reminded us that the thing that we're not allowed to have any left over of is the meat, right? You're right, Rachel. Right? I'm kind of being playful, but the Torah says, "Lo tu'tiru minu ad boker," do not leave any of it left over, specifically about the meat, the korban pesach. But
right.
Since it doesn't say you're not allowed to have any matzah or maror left over, then Rashi is playfully through the Mechilta saying maybe that's the extra stuff they took. You're right, but the thing that they're supposed to fully consume is the meat, or the seitan.
Okay.
Okay, Norm.
Yeah, I would consider. I just would confirm that having attended well over 140 Sidorim in my life, I have never been to one where there was not any leftover matzah and more.
Okay, we have one more. Now that you just gave the microphone away, you have one more Rashi to read, Norm.
Al Shechman.
Which means on their shoulders. A shechem is a biblical word for shoulder.
Shebehenos harbe holichu imahem mechabchim.
Mechabevim.
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 Mechabevim. Hoyu es hamitzvah. On their shoulder. Although they took many cattle with them, they bore these items on their shoulders because the commands of Hashem were so dear unto them.
So here Rashi is being slightly more explicit than the previous comment, right? But I think the same implication. And in terms of the cattle they brought with them, right? Look at verse 38, which is going to come up probably next week. We get that far. We're told in a few verses, V'gam erev rav ala itam. We'll spend a lot of time talking about that. There's some kind of a mixed multitude that went up with them. And also tzonu vakar, they had sheep and they had cattle, umikneh, kaved, ma'od, and heavy laden beasts of burden. So Rashi is saying, going back to what Torah said before, why did they have to do makeshift rucksacks with their dresses? Why couldn't they have sent everything on the donkeys' backs, right? And so Rashi's answer also to the Mechilta is what? If, there's a double if it's the case that the misheret is not just the dough baskets, but the remainders of last night's Seder, and these symbols of God's commandments are so beloved to them, they wanted to hold them in their hands and not just think of it as like stuff that they have to schlep along. So it's a double midrashic move, painting the Israelites as proto-religious chassid.
Which commandment?
The commandment to do the rituals of the Exodus.
He said they schlepped on their shoulders thing.
What's that?
He said that they schlepped it on their shoulders and didn't put it on them because
Right, because they wanted to clutch it themselves. They wanted to be in physical contact with it. So his comment on Al Shikmam relies on the fact that he's reading Misharotam as the leftovers from the Seder night and not what it probably means, which is just a container. Barry?
On the note of cattle and sheep, our concept of slavery is not what they were. Although they were slaves, they owned cattle and sheep.
Right, and they also despoiled the Egyptians on the way out, as we're going to read a little bit. So,
I just had this vision of how when you're packing and flying somewhere, there's things that you put in your carry-on that are not the same as the things that you put in the luggage that's going to be underneath. And so the things that you're going to carry with you are the things you have to have. You have to, that's what you have to keep close. I mean, not just for the habibiness of it all, because you need this close. This is part of the whole from God's commandment. This stays close to your body.
So we're being told that they traveled with fewer than 3.4 ounces of water on their ships, but all their lithium batteries were with them and not on the ship luggage. Matt.
Just a point of information, the Warfix dictionary says shechem means upper back.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah.
It's a fine.
The shoulder is an upper back. Is that what the shoulder is? It's
So right now here, which is there.
Don't we have defined in
Do you have Tefayim in the Torah itself? Someone has to look that up. I don't know. A quick survey in my brain doesn't remember a verse that has katef, but I don't remember. Larry.
Sorry to go back to the question of which mitzvah. I'm having a hard time understanding even the grammar of the end of Rashi's phrase.
Okay.
Nechabavim. So indeed, it was dear to them, right? Nechabivi.
It's a transitive verb. Put the hayu first. Hayu mechabavim. They were those who expressed love towards.
And ha-mitzvah.
Ha-mitzvot.
No, ha-mitzvah.
You have mitzvah?
Yeah. I have mitzvah.
Does anyone have mitzvot?
Oh.
Different manuscripts, okay? Okay.
That's why I was asking which mitzvah.
Uh-huh.
So is it the mitzvah of matzah?
Yeah.
Or is it the mitzvah of Passover Eve?
Interesting. Let me quickly pull up the Mechilta from which this is taken. And let's see what's the language of the Mechilta. My version of Rashi has mitzvot.
I have mitzvot.
What verse are we? 12 what?
34.
1234. Okay.
Oh.
Even
Rashi.
the Torah claim has mitzvah.
And the Torah claim usually is very good on manuscripts. So the Sefaria version of Rashi has mitzvah. Let's see if I can find the Mechilta.
Silverman has mitzvah too.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he translates it as mitzvot, which is really weird.
Dapperstein has mitzvah
This
also.
is interesting.
In
Okay.
verse 34?
Dapperstein also has
Review the
mitzvah.
Mechilta. Okay, so on the right-hand side is the original Mechilta. Mechilta is the Agadic Midrash on, the halachic mitzvah midrash on, look like this, on the frieze, Shurot v'simlotam al shichmam, it was bound in their garments on the back, on their upper backs. Matt, I'm with you. Rabbi Natan Omer, Shechilo hayasham behema. What? They didn't have an animal? B'harei kfar namar. After all, it already said. I love the word already. It hasn't said it yet. It's coming up, but already can mean like in Revelation. And in the Revelation of Torah, it already said Began Erev Rav Alaitam B'tzon Bakar. They had all these animals. Umat tilmod l'lamar. So what should it there come for? Come to teach us. Surot b'silatam al shikman. Ela shahayu Yisrael v'chabavin et hamitzvot. That the Israelites express love towards the mitzvot. Why some indications of Rashi, some versions of Rashi turn into hamitzvah? I don't know if that's a nothing or a something. I don't know if that's just offering a commentary on the Mechilta and him saying, right, like the concept of mitzvah was important to them, or he thinks that it referred to the specific mitzvah of the previous night. I don't know. It's a good question.
So I'm reading the things we talked about before into Rashi's own dialogue with himself. The previous Rashi was that they were the leftovers.
Yeah.
And the previous one to that, I think we were saying that the Egyptians were forcing them out, right? Unless you think that it was because of the Egyptians or because of the leftovers, it's because this was a command from God. So we're going back to, at least for my satisfaction, to this is why we do it, and we love, and most of us, I think, agree, somehow we love to eat matzah, even though it's terrible.
Yeah. First of all, I don't think matzah is terrible. I actually whole wheat matzah is like my favorite cracker in the world. Second of all, right, this is worth lingering on for a second. Even if it's the case that growing up and hopefully throughout life, one of our favorite Jewish times a year is Pesach, and families sit down reading skits like that. It would be great to go back to the spiritual mode that Rashi and Mechilta are reading the Israelites in, which is to love these mitzvot, because so much of Pesach has become onerous and burdensome. There's a lot of not loving those mitzvot, right? Alongside enjoying the holiday, but there's a lot of like resenting the cost in our crazy modern 21st century version of Hilchot Pesach, which is, I think, criminal, right? Sometimes actually criminal. The burden of the cleaning, it's easier and harder to clean a modern kitchen than a medieval one. It's easier because we have self-cleaning ovens. It's harder because they're bigger, there's more stuff. We have cabinets filled with years worth of food, right? It's a harder thing. And so I like the idea of Rashi, who could not have imagined our world, saying that they love these mitzvot. We should too. 1 second, Stevie, your mother wrote something I want to put up. I'm going to say out loud. I don't think I didn't share this chat. Has anyone here read about keeping a bread starter dough on your body to keep it warm in a cold environment? I'm talking about the Nisheret. I know I read about this in some historical fiction books. I wonder if that would practice in place at this time.
Wow. Okay.
Stevie.
Like the gold miners in Alaska famously kept the sourdough starter.
Really?
Wow. When they were stuck,
Wow.
in the cabin, and the day was falling, and the door opens, and they say, fit right out for man, no beast. That was it. Never mind. Keep going. That's interesting. I was saying this. Something we haven't brought up yet is this midrash or Rashi is perhaps disabusing us of the perhaps more shot, but alternate reading that they did this because they didn't yet have vessels and animals. They're about to get them in the next two verses. They're about to get vessels explicitly, and then they're going to get a bunch more people who presumably are bringing these animals with them. But right at this moment, right when the Egyptians are herding them out, they don't have that stuff yet. And the Midrash is saying, no, don't read it that way. They did this by choice.
That's a wonderful and complex way of interpreting that. Thank you, Steve. That's great. That's very rich. And then therefore it would be once again the Midrash wanting to have us believe, and Rashi pick up on that these were not just frenzied people. These were religious people already to do God's will and to have those obligations to be beloved of Him.
The other reading also, like you were saying about Sharansky earlier, like here it's like Moshe perhaps sees them in this state and says, no, before we leave, let's ask for some stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, God told Moshe to say that beforehand, but the way it's presented in this parak, in this passage, seems to be a response to this circumstance.
Marshall?
I find your reading of Apal very interesting. Oath law, not yet. But I was wondering if Apal also means, despite the fact that they had many cattle and not whatever. Yeah, the word Apal means despite the fact.
Despite, even though, those are. Am I missing a subtle distinction between those two?
I don't know. I was thinking of despite the fact.
But in English, doesn't despite the fact and even though connote the same thing?
I don't know.
Yes.
And the fact also that it's saying, and I know Rashi is quoting in the filter here, Behemot Harbe. I guess if I were writing it, I would have said Behemot Rabot, but I don't know the difference between Harbe and Rabot.
Yeah, I think that
you say Harbe Zaman a lot of time,
right?
But I would think Rabot has to agree in terms of
Harbe works more adverbially, and it doesn't have to match up the thing it's modifying. So why he chose the more adverbial, not like Harbe don't do a declension on, right? Whereas Rav you do. I don't know. In modern Hebrew, can you say Harbe? In the plural, Harbe.
We say Harbe Zaman.
Harbe Svarim. You say Harbe Svarim. You can say that, right? Yeah. Somehow it just means it's almost like modifying the yesh as opposed to the Svarim. Muchly do I have books.
And no, it is. You just not.
That's good for
So even more so, even though, despite that they had all these animals, they could carry all kinds of stuff. Even so, they carried this stuff on their shoulders.
Correct. Okay, let's go to the next verse, verse 35. Shkoach Norm. Who have we not heard from? Leonard, do you want to read verse 35?
Okay. Carl.
ובני ישראל עשו כדבר משה, וישאלו ממצרים כלי כסף וכלי זהב ושמלות. Okay, and the children of Israel did as Moses told them, and they borrowed, asked for, whatever, from the Egyptians, vessels of silver and gold and lots of clothing.
Reinforcing Stevie's suggestion before that all the stuff that they're eventually going to leave with, they didn't have in the previous verse. This is where they get. Okay. Yes. Elon.
So my first impression is I am troubled by the word requested.
You're troubled that that's the way it's translated?
No, that's what it means. And they asked, right? Is there another interpretation? It's kind of like, these are mafia henchmen and said, nice little country you have here. Be ashamed if something happened to it, or something more happened to it. Why don't you give us your gold and garments, etc. And we'll see what we can do, right? I mean, it seems like an odd choice of words, right? As opposed to they demanded. I'm not sure why that word.
Yeah. So again, we're always in the translation problem. In modern Hebrew, shin aleph lamed means to ask, to request. In the Hefil means to borrow, lahashil, right? That doesn't mean we know what concept was in the brain of ancient Hebrew speakers when they saw this verb. And later on, in the next verse, when it's turned into a he feel, Vayashilum Vayinatzlu et Mitzrayim, that verse is sometimes translated as in they despoiled the Egyptians, which I think you would agree was more akin, at least in English, to what you think is happening. And yet it is indeed the same verb that is used when this concept is introduced. That was not that many verses ago, but it's probably many weeks ago. Hold on. 1 second. Where's that verse? It's a different chapter. Look at chapter 11, verse 2. So it is farther farther ago than I thought. When God is setting up the temple, at the beginning of chapter 11, to remind ourselves, look to verse 1. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, God said to Moses, Od nega echad adi al Paro, I'm going to bring one more plague, v'al Mitzrayim, upon Egypt. After that, Yishalach etchem mizeh, he will dispatch you from here. Kisholcho kala garesh etchem mizeh. We're not going to go back to how hard of a syntax that phrase is, but something like when he sends you out, it'll be complete. He's going to really throw you out of there. Daber na ba'oznei ha'am, speak to into the ears of the people. V'yish'alu ish me'ei re'ehu, and each of them will shoel from their neighbor. Now, the Hebrew word for neighbor here is re'ehu. Re'ah is normally a tender word from the people who were living next to you, right? Remember, as Barry said before, this was a different kind of concept of slavery, not that it was anything good than we think about in the modern era. And they were slaves, perhaps living amongst non-slaves, and they may even have had friends amongst the non-elite Egyptians. The Isha me'et uta, and each woman from her female friend, klei chesed u'klei zahav. In that verse, it doesn't necessarily mean the mafia, I'm going to force you to give me what I want. It might mean on the way out, like turn to your Egyptian neighbor, the ones who are not your taskmasters, and see if you can take some stuff with you, because maybe they'll have Rahmanas on you as you go into the desert. And I also agree that in our scene, it seems to suggest that it could be more forceful, and we don't know what that word really means. The translations are all over the place, right? Are we seeing the generosity and kindness of some of the Egyptians who were actually against what their own pharaoh was doing and they wanted to give back pay to the Israelites? Or are we seeing God flex God's muscles and say, you can take anything you want on the way out, right? You can think about how this operates in the modern era, right? Think of all the articles written in both directions about what happened when Israelis went into homes in Gaza, right? Some people read it as the wicked Israeli soldiers who have no respect for the possessions of the local Palestinians and are despoiling the houses from their stuff, right? Or is the story more that the Israelis once in the midst of war are taking advantage of the provisions that are there because they need something to support themselves, and it's not something mafia-esque, but more subsistence. We don't know. I see a lot of hands. Let's go around. Diane, let's go all the way around. Diane. We'll go counterclockwise.
So it's interesting that what is being asked for isn't common everyday things, but silver and gold, which are more in the nature of luxury goods, and not necessarily useful either. I mean, we don't know if they're taking jewelry or if they're,
what are they next going to be used for?
To golden calf, right.
Spoiler alert.
Right.
I got it. I wasn't even aware that I was saying that when I said it. Despoiler alert.
And does an omniscient God know when he's telling Moshe that that's what they're supposed to be bringing, what they're going to be used for? I mean, raises all kinds of interesting possibilities.
Yeah, thanks, Norm.
We also have a tradition that dates back to Exodus 10:22 or so, that during the plague of darkness, the Israelites were able to go into the Egyptian homes unseen and see where they kept this and where they kept that. So that when they get to our current verse and you say, gee, we'd like to have your silver and your gold vessels and
the ones that, no, I mean the ones in the upper cabinet.
Yeah. Somebody says, oh, I have this one little cup. Well, no, you also have your silverware that's in the drawer at such and such a place, and the gold is kept in such and such a place. And by the way, we want to be sure to get that fur coat that's in the spare room.
It's like when you go to a Shabbos meal and you're not being served the good whiskey. you know there's another cabinet somewhere that has the good stuff. Going back to what Diane said before, Rashi is going to probably won't get till next week, the week after. Now I lost my train of thought. What was the last thing you said, Diane?
Their luxury goods are.
Yes. So Rashi is going to make a comment about the relative luxury of gold, silver, and garments, and it's counterintuitive, and it's going to be much more interesting than what you just said. Marshall?
Yeah, Alter has.
Oh, sorry. Did I skip over you?
No, I'm after them. Let's put my hand up so I'm in the line.
Alter has a translation of Klei Chesed and Klei Zahav as ornaments of silver and gold, and not silverware.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Meaning more in the realm of luxury.
Luxury, yeah.
Leonard?
I have a question on a slightly different subject here.
Okay.
And that is that I know in the desert, we were fed manna from God. And I don't remember hearing anywhere about how the cattle were fed. So we have lots of cattle and sheep, and so do they like manna?
Oil.
I smell a master's thesis coming. Can't wait to read it and celebrate your graduation. Good question. I've never thought about it. Great question. Keep it going. To Stevie.
I'll disagree, I guess, with the common vibe here, but it seems to me that in this passage, we're about to see that the Egyptians were favorably disposed, and like that's why they agreed. I don't see this strong arming happening at this local level. It's certainly happening with Moses and Pharaoh, but with the average Israelite and their Egyptian neighbor, it seems like this was genuine generosity, even if somewhat influenced by their desperation to get rid of these people, and perhaps by the misconception that they're going to be back in 3 days.
Yes.
Right? Because so far there's, the indication has been that they're going for a holiday, not that they're going forever. And, but I'll also say that we could also use this to reread the previous verse and say, maybe they were putting on a show so that they could act more desperate than they really were, so they could, beg for a little bit more. And that's the valence that they were stumbling as, but any which way, it seems like they were, perhaps manipulated, but that they were giving up stuff somewhat willingly.
Right. And one of the joys of reading the text as slow as we do is that we generally read verses as if their own universe and sometimes forget about what's connected before after. The next verse, which we're not going to get to today, I don't know if it's not responding to your concern, but it's telling a story that suggests it's not a mafia force, but a being positively disposed. The Egyptians somehow were positively disposed to us on the way out. Do we believe that? That's a different story. But it does not necessarily indicate that there was a forced removal of stuff. But all the translations are very are all over the place, right? So Everett Fox on this verse says, now the children of Israel had done according to Moses' words. They had asked of the Egyptians objects of silver and objects of gold and clothing, had asked. But by the next verse, because the next verse, just look ahead, we've got the verb vayashilum, and then another verb vayinat slew, and not sail, means to take advantage of, to exploit. So by the next verse, Everett Fox is saying the Egyptians had sort of permitted themselves to be asked, but then they got stripped. So they got maybe almost were too generous and they became too vulnerable. Hard to know. Did you give another translation? All right, so let's keep it going down this way. We'll go, everyone whose hand is up, we'll listen to you because class began late, so we'll end late. But no more new hands because we're going to run out of time.
So I want to bring the word fear. In all these Egyptian households, there have been one or more deaths just moments ago. They're deathly fearful. And so this is a twist on Halloween. They're more than happy to have the doors open and let them come in and take what they want to take.
Yeah.
They're out of utter fear.
Yeah. Before Sue speak, just some of the different translations of our verse. So the Fox was, they had asked of the Egyptians. JPS 2006, they borrowed from the Egyptians. Koran Bible, they had asked of Mitzrayim. Mitsuda, they requested of the Egyptians. So everyone's trying to figure out what the feeling of this ask was. Sue?
I have two things. One, on the clay, silver, and zahav, and my father was a scrap metal recycler. You can take ceramic bowls with you anywhere you want to go, but if you're going to schlep them through, it's highly likely that they'll break. You're not going to go for that long. And metal and gold won't. Metal and gold is not going to break while you're loading and unloading and stopping and doing whatever. And you can melt them down. And obviously, which is what we do with the golden calf. But even before they're in it, you can melt them, reform them into anything you need, anything to whatever it is. It's a malleable resource. So there's that. This is a totally different thing because I find myself really sitting in this. I don't know if any of you have heard this interview with one of the recently released hostages who, in the darkest of the darkness of the tunnels that he was held captive in, there was like one time. Have any of you heard this? It's something you gotta go find this. He found God. He once a day, in the depth of his darkness, he found himself in a space where he was in direct contact with God and filled with light and warmth. It's the most amazing thing you've ever heard a person say. And and in fact, he said, I'm trying to find those moments now. I actually miss this about being in the tunnel. Oddly, a very bizarre, he talks about how he learned in the tunnel. He would think, I'm going to ask God how he's doing with all this. Anyway, the reason I'm sharing this is because I'm thinking about that and, Gaza and the tunnels and the darkness and the savior from Egypt and how the Israelites, could follow a light and live through that darkness and how did they get inspired and this whole moment of Exodus. And it just really kind of relates to how God was leading the Israelites.
I think I was just blocking.
Oh.
That's like, where's Sue in that image? Rebecca?
In the verse that you had showed us, chapter 11, verse 2, the Rashi, he cites in Genesis 15, 13, and 14, that God spoke to Abram and said, the people shall be in a land not theirs, they shall be enslaved and oppressed 400 years, and in the end they shall go free with great wealth. So maybe, so Moshe was trying to fulfill that prophecy. Oh, right, I forgot. You need to take some wealth with you.
It was all predicted. Whose hands were up before? Larry? I see you, Rick.
So the distinction here in verse 35, it seems to me, and basing this on just an obtuse note from Kaplan, is to Devar Moshe. As Moses had said, that it's got to be related to they were doing something that Moses had commanded them to do. And what did he command them to do? One was in the verse you cited, verse 2 in chapter 11. And the other is in, that was from Kaplan, in verse 22, chapter 3, verse 22. What's common about all of those is they all use the same Hebrew verb, Sha'al, which reminds me of a story I know that we've all told you, which is that in Africa, we learned very early on that when you borrow something or ask for something, it's a gift. And we were warned, if someone wants to borrow something, you're not just loaning it to them, you're giving it to them.
Like a lulav.
I was just going to say, kind of like you remind people every year that when they give the lulav, it's a gift. It's not something that you're loaning.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing about the three different verses are, in the first verse, in chapter 3, it says that every woman shall borrow articles.
Mm.
And then in the verse in chapter 11, it says men and women.
Mm.
And then in verse 35 here, where we're reading it, we fudge the thing by saying Bnei Israel.
Yeah.
Which can be considered everybody.
Yeah. Look back, everyone. Thank you for that reminder to chapter 3, verse 22 is the last verse of chapter 22, because it actually is the verse about this topic that has the most amount of information. This is burning bush mode. Okay, this is not when God repeats that command to Moses before the 10th plague. Burning bush. Chapter 3, starting with verse 20. Verse 20, V'shalachti et yadi v'hiketi Mitzrayim. I'm going to extend my hand and I will smite the Egyptians. B'chol niflotai, all of my wonders. Asher aseh, I'm going to do amidst them. Afterwards, he'll let you go. And now, verse 21, Elon, which comes before the reference to the borrowing, in our chapter, this concept is going to come in the next verse, right? V'natati et chen ha'am. I'm going to put the grace of the people, be'enei Mitzrayim, in the eyes of the Egyptians, which means I'm going to make it so that the Egyptian people on your way out are going to feel favorably towards you. And when you go, lo telchu rekam, you're not going to leave empty-handed. This is reparations. Each woman will ask from her neighbor. That sounds very filled with comity, right? And from even people who are living in their home, which maybe suggests the intermingling of families. Clay chesed, can I have some silver? Plays the havus malod. You're going to put them on your children. I forgot that phrase. But then, and by means of that, it might look nice. You're going to have taken advantage of Egypt. You're going to get what you deserve, or you will have exploited, taken advantage. It's hard to translate, but you're going to have extracted, draining them well.
Egypt of wealth.
So maybe all of this is about both. It's about an impression that there's something non-violent about the asking, but the overall story is on your way out, you will get your due. We're way over time. So remember what you were going to say. Rick, we'll start with you next time. Write it down. I need to get to the next thing. Have a good day, everybody.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.